Brian Will. Awesome to meet you here on the trip. We are sitting in Antarctica, and I'm sorry for you because you don't get to see the window. We tried to play with the lighting, but it's not happening. So we'll enjoy the view in the meantime.
Yep. I appreciate you having me. This is awesome.
Yeah, definitely. It's super fun to carve out the time. For the sake of background, one of the things that I think is really helpful is to understand kind of at what level people are playing at and what experiences people have had in life. And that for me is always a guide of, should I actually believe what they're saying? Mm-hmm. or should I act on it, right?
Sure.
So you sold your first company a long time ago at this point.
1999.
Awesome. So can you give a little backdrop of what the company was and at what scale it was at?
You know, that particular company, back in the old days, prior to the internet, literally, I got in the insurance business, and back then we had to go essentially door to door, face to face. We called it belly to belly.
Oh, belly to belly insurance sales?
Yeah,
in
so
99?
we were selling health insurance back then, and it was a belly to belly. So I would have to call you up as a customer and see if you would want me to come see you, and I'd go out and visit your home, and half the time you wouldn't be there. And if you were there, I would sit down, and half the time, then again, I would find out that you're either too sick or too old, and I couldn't sell you an insurance policy. And then half the time that I would sell you an insurance policy, we'd come back later and find out you lied to me, and you were too sick or you were too old, and we still didn't get the policy done. And so your success rate at the end of the day on what you get paid on was very small. The challenge we had back then was, in my particular case, you have to do, both marketing as well as sales. And when you're marketing, that means you have to answer the phone so people know, you're there, they can call you, you answer the phone, you can set appointments. When you're out on appointments, you couldn't be home to answer the phone. And so I got into the business of selling insurance and very quickly realized that the system was extremely inefficient. And I remember thinking to myself, if I didn't have to actually go out and see the customers, I could stay home and I could just sell them over the phone, then I could make more money. So I literally hired this guy, Andy, and I would sell the customer over the phone, and Andy would drive around and pick up the applications and sign them and get the checks and bring them back to me. This was like the first step. By the way, I think most successful companies are a progression of ideas. You never really know where you're going to end up when you start a lot of times. But if you look at the end result and you back up to where you began, you realize that there's a progression of ideas that keep moving you into the next level or the next phase, right? So my next level was Andy driving around doing all the work while I sat home. Well, this was successful. And I got to thinking one day, if I could get rid of Andy, I could make more money, right? So I called this insurance company that I was working for, and I said, hey, instead of going out to see a customer, we have this new thing called a fax machine, and it's legal. So can I just fax paperwork to people and they fax it back? And they said, well, we'll give you a little test on this. We'll let you be the guinea pig on this system. So we started faxing. I would sell it over the phone. We'd fax the application to a client. They would fax it back to me, and then I would fax it into the company. It worked. We ended up building in 1997 the second largest agency in the country in health insurance for Assurant. And I'm competing against guys with 400 or 500, agents across the state or the country. And so what we had essentially created was the very first call center environment to sell health insurance. Hadn't been done before. Well, in 1999 rolls around and the internet takes off. eHealth Insurance jumps in. Simply Health launched in Atlanta with a $30 million venture capital investment. And they were trying to figure out how to sell insurance online. And I was the only guy in the country that had a little call center, so to speak, even though we're doing it by fax. And so we got acquired. We went from selling insurance face to face to, me hiring Andy, me firing Andy, me hiring another guy, and then somebody to do the paperwork. And pretty soon I was doing nothing to selling to this .com. And we launched the first online insurance portal, which was simplyhealth.com.
I want to ask a question about how you think about the progression of things. And so that's always, and I want to keep going with kind of the specifics of the next business, because the next one was relevant to this. But there are people, like we're on the boat with Cameron Harold, who's a good friend of mine, and his cornerstone concept, I think, is a vivid vision, which is this trademarked idea of you need to paint the picture in vivid detail for the next 3 years specifically, and push that out to everybody. Which could work in alignment with, or could be totally contrary to the statement of things evolve over time and you figure it out as you go. How do you look at sort of the vision statement, et cetera?
I think he's exactly right. But the part that's missing out of that is you also need to be able to improvise and adapt along the way. Too many people get locked into their vision and fail because they're not willing to improvise and adapt and adjust and move and, change directions, even if it's slightly. Too many people lock into the vision, and that's what gets them in trouble. It's absolute clarity. You have to have absolute clarity in what you're doing. But as Mike Tyson says, everybody has a plan to get punched in the face.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So you got your clarity, you got your vision, you get punched in the face. Maybe you need to go right or left instead of straight on and keep getting punched in the face.
Oh, yeah.
So all you're doing is adapting the clarity or adapting the vision to where you're continuing to go.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, okay, you were selling insurance through fax machines, which I have to think that the paperwork on those things was fucking terrible by the end of the chain of faxes.
Well, the problem was most people didn't have fax machines. So I would we would look up where they lived and we'd find a grocery store or a bank or some other place. I'd say, okay, now I'm going to send you directions to get down to the Super Duper, and the Super Duper's got a fax machine. They'll charge you $1 a page. And we would get people driving all over town sending us faxes.
That's amazing.
It was crazy.
So you sold to a .com, and were you still involved at that point when you sold?
Yeah, they brought me in, interestingly enough, and this is one of the challenges and particularly in my life. I've got no education, didn't go to college, got kicked out of high school, managed to graduate, went into the military. So when I got bought by this venture capital company, even though I was the basis of the entire company, the first thing they told me is we can't put you on the website. We can't tell anybody who you are because you don't have an MBA.
Wow.
So they demoted me in my own company to a sales manager and brought in a young, sharp MBA to take over my company.
Wow.
Which was hilarious, but that's the way it worked back then. Incidentally, after several months, I went from the big corner office to a cube about this big, literally, in the cubicle row. The CTO of the company and I got together and we decided that this online insurance portal that we were building to sell retail would be better sold to carriers and allow them to use it as the back-end system for all their agents in the field. And so we ended up developing a company called Connecture, which was the backbone at the time for online health insurance sales at the carrier level. So if you go to an insurance carrier and you'd sign up, you're basically using one of our products. They ended up shutting the entire resale side of Simply Health down, took Connecture public, and today it's the backbone for Medicare.com. So Medicare.com, 1-800-Medicare, that's all that company we built.
Crazy. And also, I think, speaks to the idea of roll with the punches and adapt as you go.
Well, it's a progression. Who knew when I decided to do faxes that one day we would be selling the software to an insurance carrier to power their 10,000 agents? Who knew?
Clearly,
but you're sitting there and you go, you know what? We could do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's roll that way. And so you move and it works.
Yeah. So ultimately, that software company you sold to.
It went public and then it went back private again. So I don't own any of that. I found that most of the companies that I've built and sold got much larger after I exited because that's not who I am. I'm the builder. And much like I think Cameron said, when somebody's willing to give you money, you take it. Yeah. So I took my money when I took it, and then these venture capital guys or these private equity firms would take it to the next level.
Well, I think that's the hope in life, is that you find the synergies, right? The relationships where people effectively do the things that you don't, and then you're both happy to have that exchange.
100%.
Right? Then it's a win-win for everybody. Yeah. Whether they quote unquote overpay or not, as long as everybody's happy with the exchange, perfect.
Exactly.
Okay, so when did you wash your hands of that business? When did you move on?
I got out of that business and didn't know what I was going to do. Quit working for about a year or so, and then decided I wanted to do it again. So I started another online insurance company. The internet.
No non-competes or anything?
No, I bought that out.
Awesome.
Yeah. So we launched another one, but at this point, the internet was really rocking and rolling, and most of the lead gen was done online, as opposed to the old days we did it with Yellow Pages. Like I had Yellow Page advertisements in 13 cities and 6 states, and that's how I generated my leads on the first company. Well, now all of a sudden you got the internet out there and people are cranking out leads. So
and when is this?
This is 2001.
Okay.
Weirdly enough, the first day we started that company was 911.
Oh, wow.
Like I went in that morning, started doing a sales training with a bunch of folks, and everybody's phones are blowing up, and finally somebody answers the phone and like turn on the TV and the towers were coming down. That was day one for that company.
Crazy.
So we launched that company and we're doing really well, but I was buying leads from all these different lead vendors out there. And it turned out that the people who owned my building were a lead vendor company. And so I got to be friends with the CEO of that company. His name was Steve. He turned out to be one of my best mentors in life. And Steve said, we need to do a deal. And I said, let's do a deal. He said, all right, I'm going to launch a new company and we're going to do lead gen for the insurance space as well as a little bit of subprime space. And I'm going to run the internet side. You're going to run the insurance side and we're going to build this sucker up and go with it. And I said, okay, so now I've got an internet company and an insurance company. This is 2001, 2002, 2003. So here we are rolling along, and this is one of my favorite stories. And the first year in the internet business, we had dropped about $500,000 into it, generated zero revenue. I mean, zero. And I remember my CPA comes in, it was right before Christmas. He comes in to see me and he says, Brian, you need to shut the internet company down. It's going to bankrupt you. It's sucking all the cash out of the insurance side. You're not making any money. You're barely paying your bills. The internet thing is killing you. Shut it down. So I'm freaking out. I go home. I'm talking to my wife at the time, and I'm like, I want out of this thing. I'm done. This internet thing is, I don't know anything about it. I'm not an internet guy. I'm an operations guy. All I know is we ain't making no money. Mm-hmm. So I come into work the next day, and my partner Steve comes and he sits in my office. And mind you, Steve's probably made $20 million at this point, and I'm struggling at making $100,000. Mm-hmm. And he sits down in his holy t-shirt and his dirty shoes, and he drives a pickup truck, and he says, hey man, we're going to put another $66,000 in this company. And I was like, Steve, we ain't made no money, dude. He goes, don't worry about it, Brian. It's going to work. I'm like, we ain't made no money, like none, like zero. Like I'm going bankrupt. And he's looking at me and I'm freaking out. He goes, I'll tell you what, Brian, I'll make you a deal. I'll give you your equity back in your company. You give me my equity back in mine, and we'll walk away as friends. No muss, no fuss. We just walk away. All good. But I need to know right now. So here I am sitting at the desk, my desk. And you ever had one of those days where that ping pong ball's going back and forth, like I'm in, I'm out, I'm in, I'm out, I'm in, I'm out. And I just told my wife I'm out. I went out of this thing but then I looked over at him and I'm thinking, here's a guy who's made a crap load of money and I ain't made none. I sold my first company, but by the time you pay taxes and pay off your house and buy a nice car and do stupid stuff, the money's gone. Typical first time sale guy. And I finally looked up at him and I said, you know what, Steve, I'm in. If we're going down together, I'm in. And he goes, all right, I don't ever want to hear that again. He gets up and walks out of my office. And now you're sitting there like, shit, what did I just do? That was in 2004. 2005, we hit. We do $6 million of revenue, pay all the money back that we had borrowed. Next year, 2005, we did $22 million in revenue. And we rolled into 2006, we hit $32 million in revenue and we got bought out for $50 million. Actually, it was 80, but we got 30 on the back end we never got, but we got 50 million cash. So literally almost 18 months from when I said I'm in, we cashed out for 55 and change.
Congrats.
Yeah, it was, and I have a tattoo that says I'm in, by the way.
Oh, I love it.
Just to remind me that, and this is a whole premise of the beginning of my book, is sometimes you need to rely on other people's experience and knowledge and ability. Take your ego out of it and listen to somebody who's actually done this before. And when I made that decision, my whole life changed.
Wow. I love that. So I think there are a lot of things there. One is obviously what you just said. The other is what changed in the year that you did 6 million. Right?
We were experimenting. Improvise and adapt. We started off with this.